A brilliant black girl scores the highest in her class mathematics test, but her racist teacher refuses to believe it. He is certain she cheated, adding that she couldn't have beaten her white classmates. Suddenly, a shocking truth is revealed, and what happens next will leave you speechless. Before we dive into today's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The classroom was dead silent as 17-year-old Zara Thompson sat at her desk, staring down at her graded test paper. A bright red 100% was marked at the top. She should have been smiling, proud of her hard work, but instead, she felt the weight of every stare in the room. Mr. Leonard Grayson, the math teacher, stood at the front, his face twisted in disbelief. He tapped his marker against the whiteboard, shaking his head as if trying to wake himself from a dream. This, he pointed at Zara's paper, his voice tight with incredulity, is impossible. The murmurs rippling through the room were immediate. Some students snickered, others exchanged confused glances, while some simply stared at Zara, unsure how to process what was unfolding before them. Zara clenched her jaw, feeling the tension build within her chest. This wasn't just about a test score, it was about something far deeper, something rooted in prejudice and systemic bias. As the moment stretched on, Grayson folded his arms across his chest, his expression growing darker by the second. "No one in this class has ever scored a perfect 100% on my advanced test," he said, his tone sharp and accusatory. "And then you," he paused, glancing at Zara with an air of disdain, as though she didn't belong in the same intellectual space as her peers, suddenly managed to do so, and by such a huge margin over the others. The room tensed even further. Every word out of Grayson's mouth seemed designed to undermine Zara's achievement, planting seeds of doubt not only in the minds of her classmates but also in her own heart. Zara felt her stomach drop, her pulse quickening as she realized exactly what he was implying, that she had somehow cheated to secure the top grade. It wasn't the first time she'd encountered skepticism from teachers who doubted her abilities because of her race or background, but this accusation felt particularly cruel and unjustified. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay composed despite the rising tide of anger and frustration. Sitting up straighter, she met Grayson's gaze with unwavering determination. "I studied hard for this test," she began, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "You gave us the review sheet, and I worked through every problem thoroughly." Grayson cut her off abruptly, his tone sharper now, almost dismissive. "I don't believe it," he stated flatly, leaving no room for negotiation. His words hung heavy in the air, their implications reverberating throughout the room. A collective gasp rippled through the students as they processed what he was saying, or rather, accusing. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. The audacity of his accusation stung deeply. How could someone blatantly disregard her effort and intelligence based solely on preconceived notions? Summoning all her courage, she looked him squarely in the eye. "Are you accusing me of cheating?" she asked, her voice firm yet controlled. Grayson didn't blink. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, his stance exuding authority, or perhaps arrogance. "Yes," he replied without hesitation. The single syllable echoed like thunder, igniting chaos in its wake. Laughter erupted from Logan Barrett's side of the room. Logan, one of Grayson's apparent favorites, chuckled loudly, clearly amused by the spectacle unfolding before him. Beside him, Macy Whitfield covered her mouth with her hand, pretending to be shocked, though her smirk betrayed her true feelings. Zara's fingers curled into fists beneath her desk, her nails digging into her palms as she fought to maintain her composure. "That's not true," she shot back, her voice rising slightly as indignation bubbled to the surface. "I've always been good at math. I worked for this." Her words carried conviction, but Grayson appeared unmoved. In fact, his expression hardened further, as if her defense only fueled his certainty that she must have done something dishonest. Grabbing her test paper from his desk, Grayson waved it in the air like evidence in a courtroom. "Then explain how you solve these problems with such precision," he demanded, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Show me your notes." Zara swallowed hard, her mind racing. She knew she hadn't relied heavily on written notes during her preparation. Most of her practice had been mental, working through equations in her head until she could visualize each step flawlessly. But explaining that now would only play into Grayson's narrative, that she couldn't possibly have achieved perfection without external help. I don't have them, she admitted finally, her voice quieter but still resolute. I did most of the work in my head. Grayson scoffed loudly, rolling his eyes dramatically for effect. Right, he sneered. So you magically solved college-level calculus in your head? I don't think so. Turning to address the rest of the class, he added, if she really understood this test, she should be able to rework these problems right now. Murmurs spread across the room like wildfire. Some students looked at Zara with pity, believing she might actually be innocent but doomed regardless. Others, like Logan, smirked, leaning back in their chairs to enjoy the show. Zara's breath came faster now, her hands clammy with anxiety. She could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, judging her, doubting her. Grayson slammed a blank sheet of paper onto her desk, the sound jolting her momentarily. Go on, he said, his voice dripping with mockery. Let's see you do it again. She stared at the paper, her mind swirling with conflicting emotions. Of course, she knew she could solve the equations again, she had proven that already. But that wasn't the point. The point was that no one else in the class was being subjected to this level of scrutiny. No one else was being treated like a criminal simply for excelling. Lifting her chin defiantly, she challenged him. Why don't you make Logan or Macy redo their answers? Grayson's eyes flashed dangerously, his patience wearing thin. They didn't score a perfect 100, he snapped. You did. Zara's anger burned brighter, igniting a fire in her chest. She could feel the sting of humiliation crawling up her spine, threatening to overwhelm her. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, she countered, maybe you just don't believe a black girl can be smarter than your favorite students. Her words landed like a bomb, silencing the entire room. For a moment, no one dared to breathe. Even Grayson seemed taken aback, his jaw tightening as he struggled to respond. Finally, he managed to sputter, "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Zara said, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside her. "You've never liked me. You've never called on me in class, never praised me when I answered correctly. But now that I've beaten everyone, suddenly I must be a cheater." Her words struck a chord with several students, who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The tension in the room was palpable, suffocating. Grayson's lips curled into a sneer, his face turning red with anger. "I don't care what nonsense you're spewing," he spat. "I am reporting this to the principal." Until then he yanked the test paper from her desk and crumpled it in his fist. "Your grade is invalid." Zara's stomach twisted painfully. "This isn't fair," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Life isn't fair," Grayson snapped back, his tone cold and dismissive. Just then, the classroom door swung open, interrupting the standoff. Principal Marcus Dean, a tall, serious-looking black man in his late 50s, stepped inside. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in the charged atmosphere before settling on Grayson. "Mr. Grayson," he said, his deep voice calm but firm, "can I have a word?" Grayson stiffened visibly, clearly caught off guard. "Sir, I was just..." Dean held up a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Outside. Now." Reluctantly, Grayson followed the principal out of the room, leaving behind a sea of whispers and speculation. As soon as the door closed behind them, the classroom erupted into chatter. Logan chuckled under his breath, leaning toward his friends. "Guess your little act didn't work, Thompson." Zara ignored him, her gaze fixed on the door. Her pulse pounded in her ears, anticipation mixing with dread. Something felt off. Moments later, the door swung open again. This time, Principal Dean stepped inside alone, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the room. Finally, his gaze settled on Zara. "Miss Thompson," he said, his tone neutral but commanding, "could you come with me?" Zara's throat went dry. Grabbing her bag, she stood up, her legs shaking slightly as she followed him out. As soon as they stepped into the hallway, she saw Miss Perez, the school's guidance counselor, standing beside a laptop on a rolling cart. The screen displayed a paused security camera feed. Dean turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Zara nodded slowly. "The classroom CCTV footage." Dean nodded. Then, without another word, he pressed play. What Zara saw made her breath hitch. On the screen, earlier that morning, before class had even started, Grayson was at his desk, flipping through the stack of graded tests. When he reached hers, he stared at it for a long time. His lips moved as if he was muttering to himself. Then, suddenly, he clenched his jaw and slammed the paper down. The footage continued. Minutes before the test was returned, Grayson glanced around the empty classroom, pulled out his phone, and typed something. Then he picked up Zara's test again, shaking his head and muttering under his breath, "There's no way in hell she's that smart." Zara's fists clenched involuntarily. Dean exhaled through his nose, his expression grim. "We've been reviewing past footage too," he explained. "It's not the first time he's done this." Zara's stomach churned. Miss Perez looked at her gently. "We're taking this very seriously. You are not in trouble, but Mr. Grayson is." At that moment, the classroom door burst open. Grayson stormed out, his face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. That footage doesn't mean anything." Dean turned to him, his demeanor shifting from calm to authoritative. "It means everything, Grayson." Grayson scoffed, clearly unwilling to accept defeat. "So what, you're going to believe this little girl over me?" Dean's face darkened, his voice dropping an octave. "No, I'm believing the evidence." Stepping forward, he delivered the final blow. "Mr. Grayson, you are officially suspended, effective immediately. You will collect your belongings and leave the premises. Now." Grayson's mouth fell open in shock. "Wait a second." But Dean didn't budge. "Security officers are on their way. Please comply." As if on cue, two uniformed officers appeared at the end of the hallway. Grayson looked around desperately, as if waiting for someone, anyone, to defend him. No one did. Finally, with a furious huff, he turned and stomped away. Zara let out a shaky breath, relief washing over her. Dean turned to her with a small, reassuring smile. "And you, Miss Thompson, have just earned yourself a full-ride scholarship." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Wait, what?" He nodded, his smile widening. "We reached out to a few academic organizations. They were very impressed with your resilience and your talent." Zara's heart pounded in her chest. "This wasn't justice," she murmured. "This was karma hitting hard." The news spread through Lincoln High School like wildfire. By the time the lunch bell rang, everyone was talking about Mr. Grayson's downfall. Some students were stunned, others whispered that they weren't surprised. But one thing was clear, Zara Thompson was no longer just another student. She was a name people wouldn't forget. Sitting at the cafeteria table, she scrolled through her phone. Her inbox flooded with messages. "Congrats, girl. You showed him. You deserve that scholarship. Damn, I knew Grayson was racist, but this is wild." But not everyone was happy. Across the room, Logan Barrett and Macy Whitfield sat with their usual group, whispering and casting looks in Zara's direction. Finally, Logan stood up. Though his voice wasn't loud, it carried enough weight to silence the people at his table. Macy smirked. "Biggest scam of the year." Zara sighed, putting her phone down. She wasn't in the mood for the nonsense. But Logan wasn't done. He turned toward her, calling out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Yo, Zara. Tell us, how does it feel to play the victim and get rewarded for it?" Zara clenched her jaw, irritation flaring. "Excuse me," she said, turning to face him. Logan shrugged nonchalantly. "You heard me. You cheated. Grayson called you out, and instead of proving him wrong, you went crying to the principal like a little girl. A few of his friends chuckled, egging him on. Macy crossed her arms, smirking triumphantly. Zara pushed back her chair and stood, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. The cafeteria grew quiet, all eyes on her. The only person who got exposed here was Grayson, she said coldly, her voice carrying across the room. I worked hard for that test, and I earned my grade. Just because you couldn't beat me doesn't mean I cheated. Logan's smirk twitched, faltering slightly. Please, he retorted dismissively. We all know you got lucky. Zara raised an eyebrow, stepping closer. Lucky, she repeated, her tone sharp. Tell me, Logan, where was my luck when Grayson ignored me every time I raised my hand? Where was my luck when I had to study twice as hard to get noticed? Or are you just mad that a black girl outsmarted you? The cafeteria went dead silent. Logan's face burned red, embarrassment and anger warring for dominance. You're pathetic, he muttered before storming off. Macy scoffed and followed, but the damage was done. A few students clapped quietly, while others gave Zara nods of approval. But she didn't need their validation. She already won. The next morning, Principal Dean stood in front of a packed auditorium. Students, teachers, and even a few parents filled the seats, curiosity buzzing in the air. Adjusting the microphone, Dean began, his voice calm but commanding. Good morning, everyone. I won't take much of your time, but there is something that needs to be addressed. Murmurs spread through the crowd, anticipation mounting. Dean continued, yesterday, Mr. Grayson was suspended after evidence confirmed a pattern of discrimination and bias in his classroom. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by murmurs of disbelief and outrage. Dean's expression remained firm, his gaze steady. But this is bigger than one teacher. It's about the culture we allow in our schools. And let me be clear, Lincoln High will never be a place where students are judged by anything other than their abilities. Zara sat near the front, her heart pounding as Dean turned toward her. Miss Thompson, please stand. She hesitated for a brief moment, then slowly rose to her feet. Dean smiled warmly, addressing the entire audience. I want every student in this room to know that Zara didn't just fight for herself. She fought for fairness, for respect. And because of her courage, real change is happening. Applause erupted, filling the auditorium with thunderous cheers. Students stood, some whistling, while even a few teachers wiped their eyes. Zara covered her mouth, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Dean's smile widened as he continued. For her excellence, resilience, and leadership, I'm proud to announce that she has received a full academic scholarship to any university of her choice. The cheers shook the auditorium once more. Zara looked around, taking it all in, the support, the justice, the undeniable truth. Grayson had tried to tear her down, but instead, he had built her up higher than she ever imagined. If you believe in standing up for what's right, hit that subscribe button. And remember, never let anyone tell you what you're worth.